And with a quorum present, I now call to order the March 27, 2025 meeting of the Hudson River Park Trust Board of Directors. Please note that the meeting is shown live via Zoom and is also being recorded, and the video will be posted on the Trust website, and a stenographer will provide a transcript of the meeting. The directors have received the agenda materials in advance of this meeting and are free to ask questions or comment at any time on the action items submitted for approval today. Please note, however, questions or comments from the audience will not be entertained at this meeting. I note that the board memos and resolutions on today's agenda have been posted on the Trust website in the link entitled Board Meetings, Bylaws, and Other Materials under Board Agendas and Minutes, and thus are available to the public. There are 6 items on the consent agenda. Number 1, approval of the minutes and ratification of the actions taken at the January 30th, 2025 meeting of the Hudson River Park Trust Board of Directors. Number 2, authorization to amend contract with New York State Industries for the Disabled, Inc. for park-wide interior cleaning services. Number 3, authorization to amend the contract with Operations, Inc. for payroll services, and authorization to extend Number 4, authorization to extend contract term with Prestige Stone and Paver Corporation for park-wide unit paving restorations. Number 5, ratification and approval of extension of contract term with Milk Urban Design LLC for landscape architectural services for Pier 97. And finally, 6, authorization to approve amendments to the Employee Handbook 2025 version. Unless anyone has any comments. Does anybody have any comments? None. Okay. I'll now call for a motion to approve all items on the consent agenda. Second. All in favor? Opposed? No opposition, abstentions? No abstentions. The motion is approved. Okay, the first corporate action before the board is approval of the 2026 fiscal year budget.
Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we actually have a new director. Not here today, but in February, Governor Hochul appointed Amanda Lefton to be the Commissioner of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, pending her confirmation by the Senate. We had the pleasure of working with Amanda during her previous work at the governor's office. We worked with her on Pier 76 and all kinds of things. And it is a real pleasure to welcome her back to Hudson River Park. We want to thank Patrick Foster for continuing to represent us here in the meantime and otherwise. So it is March, and it means that the biggest item on our agenda today is consideration of Hudson River Park's proposed final budget for fiscal year 26. The directors all received a copy of the document last Friday, and the Finance Committee met on Tuesday to review and discuss it. I'd like to thank and acknowledge Sikander Zuberi. Sikander, raise your hand. Our Vice President of Finance, who led the significant effort across all of our departments to pull the budget together. I also, of course, want to thank Kim Quinones, the Trust Chief Financial Officer and Executive Vice President, for her work, and I'd like to invite her now to present the budget to you.
Thanks, Noreen. Good afternoon, everyone. I have the pleasure of presenting the proposed FY26 budget, along with the projected financial results from the current year, FY25, ending on March 31st. The complete budget package is in front of each of you. The slideshow on the screen will break Exhibit 1 into discrete sections for ease of viewing during our discussion. And as always, please jump in with questions at any time. Before I launch into a detailed review of the numbers, it's helpful to revisit the drivers of the current FY25 budget and how these influence the proposed FY26 budget. Our results for projected lease revenues are generally on track. Mild summer conditions carried into the fall, and in June, without the previous year's smoke from the Canadian wildfires, gave tenants with outdoor spaces opportunities to extend their seasons, resulting in improved performance rent revenues for the trust. Additionally, Classic Car Club continued its occupancy throughout the year, which was not originally planned for the year. Garage occupancy was not substantially impacted by the January 2024 rate increase, and the commencement of congestion pricing also did not have a substantial impact. So we have continued high occupancy rates at Pier 40 parking. On the personal services side, continuing challenges in backfilling positions and numerous vacancies persisted throughout the year, resulting in underspending against budget. That said, we continue to work towards filling these needed positions with some recent successes, and virtually all positions are carried over into the FY26 budget. Delays in opening the Gansevoort and Pier 97 Park buildings and the full opening of Pier 97 deferred some operating expenses associated with bringing these new areas of the park into service, resulting in some lower than projected operating costs for this year. Additionally, management's planning projections of the additional cost burden of these new properties in certain areas, including utilities, appear to have been too conservative. Extensive permitting and procurement processes kept planned capital maintenance spending down in FY25. Projects have been moved into FY26 and are well positioned for execution in the coming fiscal year, making the FY26 capital maintenance budget one of the largest in recent years at the park. The trust budgets to achieve a modest operating budget surplus each year, offsetting some of the costs of capital maintenance. As a result of underspending in FY25, the current fiscal year, the amount of the operating surplus is larger than expected. Additionally, staff was not able to undertake much of the projected capital maintenance program in FY25 due to a combination of extended procurement, regulatory delays completing new construction projects, and the corresponding staff time that was devoted to that completion of the new projects. The result is significant underspending on capital maintenance in the current fiscal year. However, as we've discussed many times before, that need for capital maintenance has not disappeared. The trust is now in a phase where the primary emphasis will be on planning and executing CapM projects for the next few years, as you will see in the projected results for FY25 and the FY26 budget. The operating budget surplus from FY25 will be needed to support projected capital maintenance over the next few years, including for essential maritime repairs and the work at Pier 40. Several new capital projects will continue in planning and design in FY26, most notably the Estuarium and the West 29th to 44th Street projects. However, capital spending is relatively low because these projects are not yet in construction. Let's first look at an overview of the projected results for FY25 and the proposed budget for FY26. For all of these tables, we show actual FY24 results, present a comparison of budgeted and projected results for FY25, and the proposed budget for FY26. This is a requirement of state finance law. So this comparison is required by state finance law. I'm going to read across the rows the year-over-year comparisons in this table. Let's look first at operating revenues. In FY27, two extraordinary one-time revenue inflows from Chelsea Pier's transaction rent and the Amtrak Gateway Tunnel project totaling $17.2 million significantly skewed the annual results. These revenues have been deducted from the FY24 results here in the presentation to allow for direct year-over-year comparison. In the current fiscal year, we budgeted total revenues of $40.7 million, but project to end the year with 47.3 million in revenues. As noted, mild weather and good air quality boosted percent rents for tenants with outdoor operations, both on land and in water, and along with continued occupancy of Classic Car Club. For FY '26, we set the revenue budget at 43.85 million, higher than the FY '25 budget, but below the projected FY '25 results, allowing for economic uncertainties and frankly, cold and rain. And parking income projections are modestly reduced to account for upcoming construction. On the operating expense side, and we're looking at the total OpEx line, the staffing and OTPS budget increased significantly from FY '24 to the current year, FY '25, almost 25%. This reflected the anticipated increase in the costs of operating two new significant areas of the park, Gansevoort Peninsula and Pier 97. Budgets for staffing, utilities, landscaping, janitorial, sanitation, and security for these two large new areas were estimated to increase significantly to maintain a high level of cleanliness and upkeep throughout the park. FY '25 also reflected an expansion of staffing and programs of the river project, with the Discovery Tank opened at Pier 57. It's important to note that a significant portion of the river project's staffing costs, along with many of its operating costs, are offset by outside grants that the trust pursues on an ongoing basis. The same applies in FY '26. So delayed openings of new facilities, in particular restrooms and concessions, mitigated the expense increases that we actually ended up incurring in the current fiscal year. Desired service levels were maintained with operating efficiencies, keeping expenses down for now. Also, at the time of the FY '25 budget, not all portions of the PEP contract had been finalized by New York City Parks, that's the security line. So higher salaries and benefits than ultimately contracted went into the FY '25 budget. Finally, challenges in backfilling vacated positions park-wide, coupled with intentional delays in filling newly created positions until such positions were needed, also kept personnel expenses down in the current fiscal year. As a result, total operating expenses are projected to be 29.9 million in FY '25, a much smaller 5.5% increase over the actual FY '27 results. For FY '26, we propose to budget total expenses at 36.3 million, 1% higher than the FY '25 budget. Contracts for both janitorial and sanitation services park-wide, which are NYSED and the Doe Fund, are increasing, and supply prices also continue to rise. However, we are reducing budget estimates for utilities based on data to date for newly open park areas, and also reducing parking garage expenses. Moving to the next line, we have operating surplus or deficit after net CapEx investment, which is investment equipment, and net CapN. In FY '24, about half of the CapN projects budgeted were completed, and a surplus of 12.85 million was realized, excluding the extraordinary one-shot payments. In FY '25, a very high value of CapN projects was budgeted, 24.4 million, but just under a quarter of that spending was realized. A protracted but essential procurement and contracting process for the new CM at Risk Manager, Hudson Meridian, was completed, and delays in procurement and permitting for marine repairs also materialized. Both these critical contracts are now in place, but significant spending has not yet commenced pending continuing planning and bidding at Pier 40 and the receipt of regulatory permits for in-water marine repairs park-wide. This lower spending at CapM is expected to contribute to a projected 13.9 million surplus in FY '25, as opposed to a budgeted deficit of 8.8 million. And that flows into FY '26, where the trust proposes a CapM budget of 30.5 million. Half of this is funded by available restricted park funds, primarily Pier 40 development rights funds that may only be used for Pier 40 infrastructure, and a small $1 million HUD grant. This contributes to a proposed budgeted deficit of 7.3 million after net CapM and net CapEx in FY '25. Finally, last line, we add the effect of spending on new capital projects. The table shows that most of the costs associated with all the new construction that occurred over the last several years, including Gansevoort and Pier 97, were funded by state and city monies. And therefore, the cost of new construction or new capital did not have a meaningful impact on the trust bottom line. As you know, the trust elected to fund the design of the estuarium directly using some of its reserves to preserve principal from other sources for eventual construction with other new capital spending. The FY26 budget shows that impact. And I should remind the board that the trust fully advances construction funds, which are ultimately paid by outside funds and are then reimbursed, as the trust is not permitted to borrow to fund construction. We'll go over the full capital plan at the end of the presentation. Next slide, Robert. So this is the first section of Exhibit 1 in the budget package and takes a deeper dive into the components of the revenues. The proposed FY26 budget is in the far right column. Lease and occupancy permits are over 50% of trust revenues and are proposed to be budgeted at $24.9 million in FY26. This is a bit lower than the projected FY25 results of $25.1 million, but 12% higher than the FY25 budget of $22.1 million. It reflects scheduled rent and permit increases. However, one permit only extends through December 2025. Also, there are uncertainties associated with the revenue from the heliport in the upcoming fiscal year as the Hudson Tunnel project construction begins, but this is partially offset by construction permit revenue. Parking revenues are the next highest component of trust revenues with a proposed FY26 budget of $12.9 million in Pier 40 parking revenues net of sales taxes. This is a slight decrease from the FY25 approved budget, but below the projected FY25 results of almost $14 million. One risk to this revenue is that construction at Pier 40 will require careful management of parking spaces available, as this construction is occurring primarily in the parking garage. And the projections do allow for some disruption to the parking operations. Lastly, the impact of congestion pricing, as I said before, seems to be manageable and does not really affect our budgeted number here. Other sources of self-generated income include event and field fees. I'll note that field fees were a particularly strong contributor to revenues this year, primarily the result of new fields coming online at Gansevoort and the full return of Chelsea Waterside into service.
I have a question on the revenue, and I wish I had asked earlier, but it looks like the revenue from sponsorship and other income is going down significantly.
Yes.
And can you just illustrate what's happening there?
It reflects the economic climate right now and also less outside permitting for films, for other requests that are being made.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So we have seen a pretty significant decline in filming requests, which is like a responsive piece. Like we don't market it. Those came in and they're just not coming in. It's a city and statewide trend. We are not alone. Both the mayors and governors' offices of media entertainment are aware. We've also seen a really shift, and I think particularly with the economic uncertainty and sort of the chaos, a real retraction in corporations being willing to sign up for like long-term or significant sponsorships on like a kind of that donation basis. They really have been pulling back. We have seen an increase on the events-based activations and a shift more into activations and permits, but away from sort of direct donation sponsorships.
Okay, thank you.
So continuing to look at revenues, additional income sources include sponsorships, interest income, contributions, and grants. Overall, these revenues come in $2.1 million over budget in FY25, the primary contributor being increased interest earnings, as rates held steady this year instead of decreasing as budgeted. For FY26, we propose a slight increase to the FY25 budget level. Interest income will be less of a factor as the trust spends more of its own funds for construction. And notably, Friends anticipates contributing $1.5 million in cash to the trust once again in FY26 as they did in the current fiscal year. So total revenue is budgeted at 43.8 million in FY '26, which is a 7.6% overall increase from the previous year's budget. Now, let's look at the expense side of the equation. Next page. Thanks. Personnel is the biggest single component, which is about 40% of the expense budget. It is broken down here into full-time, part-time, and seasonals. Payroll costs are on the top, fringes on the bottom. Overall, the direct cost of the salaries associated with these positions is budgeted at 10.9 million in FY '26, which is a 1.9% increase over FY '25. Year to year, there's no change in the number of full-time employees. We're at 99. One part-time employee is added, we will now have 5. And the number of seasonal employees stays the same at 39. As previously mentioned, challenges in backfilling vacated positions and in a few cases, choices to delay hiring for newly created positions contributed to projected payroll costs for FY '25 that is 17% below budget. Also, the trust continues to budget for pay increases for unfilled positions in an effort to remain competitive in a very tight labor market. The cost of fringe benefits, a cost not controlled by the trust, we use the state's healthcare and pension programs, is budgeted at a 10.2% increase in FY '26, primarily from increased pension benefit costs. This combines for an overall 4.3% increase in the cost of personnel for FY '26. OTPS, other than personal services, which is the other major category of expenses. Total OTPS expenses are budgeted at 20.7 million in FY '26, down 1.3% from the FY '25 budget. We're projecting to be 3.7 million below the current fiscal year budget in OTPS. But as previously discussed, the park is expecting to open buildings at Pier 97 very shortly. FY '25 results did not reflect a full year of Pier 97 operations, and the cost of janitorial and sanitation services, which are DOFA and FedCap, are increasing 16%. Utility costs, water, electricity, and gas, came in lower than expected this year, and we are budgeting a reduction of 200,000 in FY '26, about 10%. Parking management is the other largest component in this category. It is budgeted to decrease as an expense in FY '26, as the previously budgeted union pay increase did not materialize in FY '25 and we don't anticipate it for FY '26. Also, after several years of capital investment in the parking operation, no such investment is expected in the upcoming fiscal year. One final contributor to OTPS is OTPS Other. See that line on the bottom? This is a catch-all category, which is detailed on page 14 of your budget documents. This captures a wide range of services and goods expenditures, supporting park operations and administration. It's increased by 13% to 8.9 million in FY '25. It is expected to end the year at just under 6 million. The category includes general consulting services, including events contracts for public programs and items such as real estate and engineering consultants, which are often budgeted because of anticipated events, but also not expended until required. They are also often reimbursed by third parties. OTPS Other is budgeted in FY '26 at $409,000 less than the budget for FY '25. So overall, operating expense, personnel, and OTPS is budgeted to increase by only 1% to 36.3 million in FY '26.
OTPS Other seems like a big contingency category, right? If we look at FY '24 actual, FY '25 actual, those are much more in line with the budgeted numbers.
Yeah,
So it feels like it's a sort of safety net in the budget.
yes and no. It's a lot of there are some real spending, some supplies are in there. Help me out with the other big ones that we actually spend.
Plant materials, there
Yes,
are any
plants.
rakes, any number of itemized expenses, toilet paper, you
Right.
know,
Right.
lots of things that are just,
Right,
But I
but
will
I guess
say
my
that
point is we're
consulting-
projecting at a level that we're not seeing, that we have not seen historically on the page, right?
Yeah,
So
no.
both actual years are between 5.5 and 6 million, and we're projecting 8.5. It's a big delta. So that's why I'm thinking of it as like we're allowing for a lot of unknowns, is what it looks like to me.
Part of it is, but a lot of it is putting in spending for consultants on the legal side, on the project side that we may need, that we ultimately end up not needing, or being reimbursed by outside third parties.
No. I think we're saying the same thing.
I just have a quick question on the janitorial sanitation with a 16% increase. Is that higher wages or more workers?
Mostly higher wages.
Higher wages?
But also then counting on having workers to fill a requested complement, which is always another challenge in any services.
And the power and utility, is there a reason that they went down?
We estimated for a higher than realized
budget.
increase, yes. So we're gonna come in probably around 1.95 million this year. I wanna put a little bit more cushion in there. Water rates are going up. But we have a very good deal on our electricity rates. Because we have NIPA electricity.
Hydro, right? Yeah.
Well, it's not the hydro, but we saved about 10% of our electricity costs last year, about $100,000 by using NIPA. So at the very bottom of the table, the NOI before net capital and non-cash expenses is shown. It's budgeted at 7.5 million in FY26 as opposed to 4.8 million in FY25. And you'll see that the result for FY25 is projected to be higher than budget at 17.4 million, reflecting 6.6 million higher revenues and 6 million lower expenses than budgeted in FY25. So how will capital spending affect this surplus? This table details the CAPM projects and funding sources in the proposed FY26 budget. These projects are also set forth in Exhibit 7 of the budget packages. Just to remind you, CAPM is a major maintenance and repairs on existing facilities, and CapEx is investment in equipment. Both are paid from surplus operating revenues to the extent outside funds or trust air rights funds are not available, and also supplemented by the application of the trust reserves if required. The total of 30.7 million in CAPM is projected in FY26, and the largest component of this is for Pier 40 at 17.8 million. Restricted funding for FY26 CAPM projects is budgeted at 15.7 million, drawn from Pier 40 restricted funds and 1 million reimbursed by a HUD grant. Balance will be paid from unrestricted HRPT funds. This table is looking at the effect of net capital spending on the bottom line, or spending on new projects after the campaign. Looking at the first green row, after net CAPM and CapEx, a deficit of 7.3 million is proposed to be budgeted for FY26. And when new project spending of 1.7 million, I should say net new project spending of 1.7 million, on new projects is added, a deficit of 9 million is budgeted for FY26. Finally, when non-cash, non-operating expenses of 8.9 million for OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, and 18.9 million for depreciation are factored in, the budget proposal generates a deficit of 20.3 million before net capital spending in FY26. Next two slides, we go quickly. The first chart, based on the functional budget information in Exhibit 2, shows the budget changes year over year by functional area. Blue is FY26 and red is FY25. As previously noted, education and park programs and ground spending and facilities and capital plant spending are nearly flat to last year's budget. Security is down in FY26, not because of projected lower staffing levels, but because last year's budget was set before the final changes were made in the PEP contract, or I should say the current year's budget. And this budget has the new budget has the benefit of incorporating the actual negotiated prices. So for the current fiscal year, we expected higher than achieved increases in the PEP contract, which is why we spent less this year, and next year we've adjusted the budget for that. Janitorial sanitation increases by 16%, as I said before, as new contracts with increased rates begin on April 1st. Also, Pier 97 will be fully open, so we will have some additional coverage added to that. Utilities are down, reflecting recent experience in billing and a recognition that staff had likely budgeted too conservatively in this area in anticipation of the park operations. We discussed that. Insurance costs increased slightly as property insurance coverage expanded to cover new park facilities, but it was a very manageable increase. Parking operations expense decreases slightly in the new year as a new union contract is not expected and lower repair needs are anticipated. And administration support and overhead, including legal costs, financial payment functions, procurement and compliance costs are increased by 3%. The next slide shows the relative distribution of the expenses across all park departments. Capital maintenance, which is the light green upper left, at 26% is the highest spending category if all anticipated projects are undertaken. Grounds, facilities, and capital plant in red at 18% is the next biggest expense category. This makes sense. We maintain a very clean and inviting park. Administrative support and overhead is 15% of the expense budget. Legal compliance, real estate, administration, and accounting, fiscal services, all supporting the park. And they often come in lower because a portion of the budget for consultants and legal service is not ultimately required during the fiscal year, as we discussed. Any questions? Go ahead.
So where do you project the reserve to be at the end of 26? Once you have done this deficit, where would the reserve be?
That is a separate discussion really related to board decision-making about how much money we want to spend on Pier 40. So the information shown in the budget is specifically a use of a small portion of the reserve. Obviously, just the last 2 years alone, you can see from the materials presented here, the reserve is significantly larger.
Yeah, that was my point.
Yeah.
You know, that's like, it's,
Yes,
even though the number looks big, it's very small in comparison to.
the use of the reserves at the moment is very small in comparison. The board will have to make choices about use of larger sections of the reserve.
Right. I was just asking about this
Yeah.
little piece, and if it's like 10% of the reserve or whatever.
It's smaller than 10%.
But there are also funds that we have to keep as a reserve for our capital expenses because we can't borrow, so we have to pre-fund all of our capital expenses even.
Yeah, no, I understand. I just wanted a like a high level
Yeah.
ratio.
No,
We're
that's good.
holding a lot of the reserves still, and they funded this budget.
Exactly.
Yes. And you have the last page. This is the anticipated spending on new construction over the next fiscal year. You'll see that most of the projects are, almost all of them are in design, planning on design right now. And most of that funding is coming out of the trust's ongoing revenues as we wait for outside to make decisions on the use of the outside funding for these different projects. So what are the risks to this budget? Obviously, economic uncertainties could affect lease revenues, parking garage receipts, and or the cost of capital projects. Speaking of capital projects, tariffs could affect construction costs. Rebars. Kevin told me the other day, rebar is steel and cement comes from Mexico. Unforeseen conditions could impact the progress of repairs in the garage at Pier 40, potentially affecting construction costs and parking revenues. We need to be moving around different areas of Pier 40 as we do construction. We could find something unexpected, could interfere with how we are managing the parking in the garage. So that's got to be very, very carefully watched over the next fiscal year. And actually the next several years as we do these repairs at the garage. And as always, the ongoing challenge of finding and keeping talented staff is a major function, a major factor in our financial results.
Thank you. This was very thorough and very clear. And we also had the benefit of reviewing this in a smaller group in the finance committee and got to ask more questions. So we maybe saw more of it. But overall, it feels like a great picture to me. Better than expected revenues, lower than expected expenses, a healthy reserve. Feels like a conservative approach to the budget overall, which I suppose is better than the alternative. So overall, I think it looks good. And but to your point about risks as well, some of the risks you mentioned are risks that you would mention in any year, and some I think are particular to this year, the things around tariffs and all that, but also the fact that we're spending 30 million plus on cap X and cap M also means that the order of magnitude of surprises or changes also becomes higher than you've had in previous years. But it sounds like based on what we're talking about, there's enough of a buffer there to manage those surprises, including in, I maintain, the OTPS other, which feels like very conservative to me.
Good. Well, thank you very much.
Exactly. Works every time.
Yeah. So I think we need an actual proposal for a vote.
Yes. All in favor? Any opposition? Abstentions? None. The motion is granted. Okay, and next we have second corporate action item before the board is the authorization to contract with Dragonetti Brothers Landscaping Nursery and Florist for Route 9A landscape maintenance work.
Landscape medians and buffers adjacent to Hudson River Park were constructed as part of the redevelopment of Route 9A and are under the control and jurisdiction of the New York State Department of Transportation. Since 2002, the trust has maintained aspects of these areas pursuant to a reimbursement agreement with New York State DOT. In accordance with the trust procurement guidelines, a request for proposals for Route 9A landscape maintenance work was published in the New York State Contract Reporter and on the trust website on January 30th, and the trust received 6 proposals on the February 27th, 2025 submission due date. The selection committee consisting of staff from multiple departments reviewed the submissions and evaluated each respondent pursuant to the evaluation criteria set forth in the RFP. Based on its review, the selection committee ranked Dragonetti Brothers Landscaping Nursery and Florist Inc. as the most qualified firm that offered the best value to perform the services. Dragonetti has extensive experience working in New York City, including for the New York City Department of Environmental Protection, and has successfully been performing the services for the trust over the past 4 years. The trust therefore requests board authorization to contract with Dragonetti for the Route 9A landscape maintenance work in an amount of $2,488,628 plus a 10% contingency for a total board authorized amount of up to $2,737,491 over a 4-year term. Funding for this contract will be reimbursed by the New York State Department of Transportation.
One question. This has come up in other contexts that Dragonetti has somewhat of a colored history with principals being involved with criminal conduct. Was any of that a factor or how to mitigate against that?
We do a responsibility determination. I don't know if that was done in advance here.
Yeah, it's done. They changed it. There's different arms of Dragonetti, so the people that work on our landscaping weren't part of those issues. So we are aware of the issues, and they do work with other agencies. So, and there's nothing that showed up on the responsibility determination. But we knew that many years ago, but those people no longer, I think they separated those people that had those issues on labor.
Just a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Thank you
Are
for
there any
letting us-
questions, comments?
None? Okay, I will call for a motion to authorize the trust to contract with Dragonetti Brothers Landscaping Nursery and Florist for Route 9A landscape maintenance work. Second. All in favor? Aye. No oppositions, abstentions, hearing none, the motion is granted. The third corporate action before the board is authorization to contract with the Doe Fund for park-wide outdoor cleaning services.
The Doe Fund is a respected not-for-profit social services organization that provides residential support services to persons formerly incarcerated or recovering from substance abuse or without homes. Under its Ready, Willing, and Able program, the Doe Fund provides transitional living and work opportunities to trainee workers who learn job skills at locations throughout New York City. The trust has been using the Doe Fund for its outdoor cleaning services for over 2 decades and remains highly satisfied with the Doe Fund's performance. The Doe Fund will provide approximately 18 trainee workers and supervisors per day to perform outdoor maintenance services in Hudson River Park and limited maintenance on the adjacent Route 9A bikeway, median, and buffer area, as well as needed supplemental services for special events and weather-related circumstances such as snow removal. Pursuant to the trust procurement guidelines, the proposed contract with the Doe Fund meets the requirements for a single source contract. The Doe Fund has performed outdoor park maintenance work for the trust for over 24 years, and the trust's experience with the Doe Fund supervisors and trainee workers has been very positive. The Doe Fund's supervisors and trainee workers are intimately familiar with the trust's physical layout and operations and have formed excellent working relationships with trust staff and park enforcement patrol security officers. Through separate social services funding, the Doe Fund supports trainee workers with safe, comfortable housing, 3 meals a day, transportation, and educational offerings. The trust is further satisfied that its cost in connection with the program is reasonable because the trust does not pay for the for-profit margins ordinarily associated with private maintenance firms contracting for such services. The trust further does not pay for benefits as it would have to do if it were to hire in-house employees directly to provide the services. Trust staff therefore seeks board authorization to contract with the Doe Fund, Inc. for park-wide outdoor litter collection and related services for a contract amount of $10,451,527 plus a 5% contingency for a total board authorized amount of up to $10,974,103 over the 5-year contract term. Funding will be subject to the board's annual review and approval of the trust's operating budget. To the extent the Doe Fund provides services for maintenance on the Route 9A medians and buffer areas, reimbursement will occur through the New York State Department of Transportation.
Any questions? If not, I'll call for a motion to authorize the trust to contract with the Doe Fund for park-wide outdoor cleaning services. Second, all in favor? Oppositions or abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved. The fourth corporate action before the board is authorization to amend the parking garage management and operation agreement with MP Pier Parking.
The Pier 40 garage is one of the largest sources of operating revenue for the trust. The garage generated over $10 million in the previous fiscal year and is expected to generate nearly $12 million by the end of this current fiscal year, net of taxes and fees. Proper management of this strategic asset requires an experienced and committed team with knowledge of parking industry standards, practices, and procedures. As approved by the board at its December 2020 meeting, MP Parking was awarded the Pier 40 parking garage management and operations contract for an initial term beginning January 2021 and ending March 31st, 2025, for a total board authorization amount of just over $9.6 million. The board also authorized 2 two-year extension options, subject to the board approving additional funding for each extension term. Throughout the initial term of the contract, MP Parking has been a reliable and responsive operator. As the trust continues to implement the required sprinkler and structural restoration work, and experienced parking operators necessary to facilitate frequent repositioning of parked vehicles and modifications to vehicular traffic flow, both of which MP Parking has managed well to date. The trust staff therefore requests board authorization to increase funding and to extend the contract with MP Parking LLC for the management and operation of the March 31st, 2027, and the amount not to exceed $3,721,626 to cover years 6 and 7 of the contract term, plus a 10% contingency for a total board authorization amount of up to $13,722,651. Funding for this contract is available in the trust operating.
Any questions or concerns? Yes.
A year?
The annual amount is about $2 million
And the 13 million in our budget is,
in the aggregate over the years.
no, the 13 million
Revenue,
in
that's the
revenue
revenue.
is including that or not including?
It's the,
How do
Um,
we measure the revenue?
in the revenue, in the budget, I think it's net of taxes, and then the expenses are separately listed in
Oh,
operating expenses.
so-
So it's about 12 million net of taxes and the fees to operate.
So it's really 10 million in revenue up here for you,
For the next
the
year,
management.
it's about 11, yeah.
minus the management fee.
Now,
Yeah.
we'll clear it.
Okay.
Net.
11, so 11 net.
For the coming year, yes. For the year that we are ending now, it's about 12 million. But because we're going to be doing construction next year and because of some increases, next year it's a little less.
Right. See, I'm already rounding down to my own, just because I'm mean spirited and now I'm rounding down more.
Do you anticipate fewer cars being parked next year, or you're just moving them around?
We are moving them around. So while we do a jigsaw puzzle of Pier 40 construction, each little zone is going to be about 70 to 80 vehicles at a time moved
Mm.
as we do above ground work and floor work.
But you can manage the full.
It's a lot of management, but yes, we can
Okay.
manage. We have experience.
Yes.
So can I just ask a clarifying question then? So we're paying MP about 2 million a year. This approval is to add 1.86 million for each of years 6 and 7. So does that mean that the annual, what we're paying them annually goes from?
No.
2 to almost 4?
No,
Okay.
yeah, I misspoke if I said. that.
Oh, so this is extent, got
Yes,
it, got
yes.
it. It's not on top of,
Congress.
much clearer. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, we're required to tell you the total amount that
Gotcha.
the contract grows by.
Sounds good.
Okay. So I will call a motion to authorize the trust to amend the parking garage management and operation agreement with MP Pier Parking LLC. Second. All in favor? Aye. Oppositions, abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is granted. The fifth corporate action before the board is the approval of list of on-call legal counsel.
The trust engages with outside counsel to support the work of the trust legal department in various areas, including real estate, construction, environment, employment, and litigation matters. In order to ensure the trust has access to qualified legal counsel when needed, the trust legal department maintains a list of on-call counsel approved by the board that is updated periodically following public procurement. On October 23rd, 2024, the trust issued a request for proposals for pre-qualification of legal services, which was noticed in the New York State Contract Reporter and posted on the trust website. The trust also sent notices of the availability of the RFP to over 200 law firms, including a robust list of MWBE and SDVOB certified firms. The RFP invited law firms, both large and small, to submit proposals in the following areas of law: real estate, construction, environmental, land use, labor and employment, copyright and trademark, regulatory compliance, and litigation. On November 26th, the trust received proposals from 38 law firms, including a large number of proposals from MWBE firms, but did not receive any proposals from SDVOB certified firms. A selection committee comprised of trust staff from the legal department reviewed the proposals based on the selection criteria contained in the RFP. And after conducting an initial review, the selection committee interviewed 6 of the top-ranked firms that had not previously worked with the trust. Based on the evaluation criteria, trust staff recommends that the board approve the list of 16 firms shared with the directors in the board materials to provide legal services to the trust when needed over the next 5-year period. The fees proposed by the law firms vary based on the firm's size, location, and areas of expertise, with many firms providing a substantial discount to the trust as a governmental entity. Most of the law firms on the proposed on-call list offer discounted rates ranging from $300 to $600 per hour for the first year of the contract. The trust will only engage law firms on an as-needed basis, and in no case would any individual contract exceed $200,000 without prior board approval. Trust staff also seeks board approval to extend the terms of 4 of the existing contracts with law firms that are currently representing the trust on matters that are still open, including the contracts with Carter Ledyard, Eric Feinstein, Rosario Tuma, and Bon Shinnick. The trust staff accordingly requests board authorization to approve the pre-qualified list of on-call law firms with individual contracts capped to an amount no higher than $200,000 and extend the term of existing contracts with ongoing matters until such time as the matter is completed, but in no case longer than 2 years. Funding for the individual contracts will be available from the trust's operating budget as approved by the board of directors each year.
Any questions? If not, I'll call for a motion to authorize the trust to approve the list of on-call legal counsel included in the board memo and extend the term of ongoing legal counsel contracts by up to 2 years. Second, all in favor? Aye. No abstentions, oppositions. Therefore, the motion is approved. And that completes the board action items for approval today. So on to the president's report.
If you are out and about near Pier 97, you'll see that the narrow area near the bow notch is about to be complete, and we are waiting for the temporary certificate of occupancy for the new park building, which we expect in April, after which we'll open the building to the public, providing bathrooms for people. We're also working on new shade panels at Pier 45. We've removed those right now. They're original to the park. We will be replacing them in time for sunny weather. And thanks to funding from Councilmember Eric Botcher, we're about to commence work replacing the turf at Pier 46. And in the fall, we'll be replacing the turf at Pier 25 as well. Staff, as you've heard today, in multiple departments have been working closely with the Design and Construction Department and Hudson Meridian to undertake the phenomenally complicated logistic planning associated with the upcoming work at Pier 40. Hudson Meridian is working on with us on a bid strategy to secure pricing for the actual garage repairs, the structural repairs, as well as the continuing fire suppression work. And once we have that, we expect the work will be starting in September. In the meantime, we will be continuing to refine the phasing plan to make sure that we've considered kids coming to play sports and the parking that you've heard about and our own offices. Literally, work will be happening over the next couple of years in pretty much every corner of Pier 40. Everyone will be disrupted at some point. The core work that we're bidding out right now will not, we don't think, affect the fields directly, but ultimately the loading dock work around the perimeter will to some degree. We will, as we always do with tenants and ourselves, provide as much lead notice as we can with everybody and try to manage this work so that it is not occurring in the busiest part of everybody's seasons. You'll hear more about that in the future. And we're continuing to work on designs for the area for 29th Street to 44th Street, as well as the estuarium, of course. The selection committee for the Chelsea Waterside and Gansevoort concessions has a preliminary selection for each site, and we're working on negotiations with them right now. We're trying to get those up and running soon. You heard in January, we talked extensively about our very difficult decision to terminate the longstanding permit with P3, the Pier Park Playground Association. Since then, we had a lot of engagement with the ball field users of all sorts, with our elected officials, and we attended a very widely attended meeting on March 5th that was sponsored by Community Board 2 on this topic. At the meeting, we heard over and over from the community about their strong interest in seeing the space continue to be used for baseball and softball youth training and programs. Unlike soccer, baseball cannot be safely played outdoors year-round in locations with cold seasonal weather, such as New York City. Older children and teenagers are capable of hitting balls fast and far at substantial distances, which is another good reason to consider an indoor training space for those capable young people to practice repeatedly without, frankly, quadrupling the size of our ball fields, which is not possible. So based on these kinds of comments, we released an RFP seeking experienced not-for-profit organizations to operate and maintain the premises to conduct and promote affordable year-round youth baseball and softball programming at scale for children at all skill levels. In lieu of paying rent, The RFP and eventual permit will require the permittee to demonstrate substantial community benefit to the public on a continuing basis through the term of the permit. Please note, for everyone, because this is a popular issue, that pursuant to the state's procurement guidelines, trust staff, including me and all of you, are not permitted to engage in any discussions about this procurement. There is a protocol that is stated in the RFP. That's what people should be referred to follow. In the meantime, staff determined that the current P3 permit could be extended until mid-August to allow continued operations for the summer 2025 very affordable camp season, and also from our own perspective to minimize the potential downtime in an unoccupied space while we undertake the competitive procurement. P3 has made substantive changes to its staffing and board since this incident occurred, and staff at the trust is confident that the issues that led to our earlier decision will not occur during this brief extension period. I'll pause for any and updating a number of you along the way. Thank you all for taking my calls. Otherwise, teams from our River Project and public programming groups have been hard at work preparing for the summer season. We'll be announcing our schedule in April, but before the next board meeting is our fabulous Submerge Marine Science Festival that will be taking place on Pier 84 on Friday, May 16th for school children, and on Saturday, May 17th for the general public. We've got a ton of fun things happening, so we're looking forward to sharing that with all of you. In February, we hosted our annual Estuarine Sanctuary Management Plan Technical Advisory Committee meeting. We had experts from many governmental partners and from nonprofits, some of our tenants there, and we all talked about priority projects and themes as we approach, believe it or not, the midway point of our 2021 to 2030 action agenda. The TAC also explored ways to best capture collective impact and successes from partner and tenant projects that help fulfill estuarine sanctuary management goals. And finally, she emailed you directly earlier today, but I want to say thank you and farewell to our wonderful Deputy General Counsel, Nicole Catino, who is leaving us for higher elevations. Here in Hudson, literally. Only literally. But she's staying part of the Parks family. She has helped us with leases big and small, Pier 57, the Intrepid, boathouses, sponsorship agreements, employment law, ethics. You will no longer get ethics emails from her, but you will still get them. Nicole, I've said this to you directly. You've been just an unbelievably important and valuable part of our team, and we're so grateful to you.
Thank you so much.
That concludes my report.
Thank you. I'll now ask Tammy Meltzer to present the Advisory Council report.
Good afternoon or evening as the time goes by, and thank you very much. We actually have our meeting on the 31st of the month, so this is a little bit of a preview versus a follow-up, but it'll give you a shortened idea. We have Sale Forth coming to give a presentation, so we can have a little bit of an idea in advance of the 250th presentation anniversary. The biggest thing I think that the two biggest things to note that we have coming up in the TAC may play an important part in this is there's an extraordinary amount of concern that we're trying to get to DEC about the CSO overflows from the Battery Park City Authority's resiliency project and having it go directly into the estuarine sanctuary on the southern tip of the park. In general, the Advisory Council and Community Board 1 both all agreed that we don't think that that's the best path to protect that area. The water doesn't flow fast enough, even with what we have going. If there was a way for the Battery Park City Authority to get it further out into the water flow, it's important. So on that note, we have the science director from Riverkeeper coming and a professor of environmental microbiology at Queens College coming for a presentation. We welcome any and all who'd like to join us. We also have 3 interviews coming up for new members from New York City Pride, Riverkeeper, and Hell's Kitchen Neighborhood Coalition, hoping to expand on the connections that we do for community to help boost, as always, attendance and connection to the park. With that, I will say if there's any questions, please let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Now ask Connie Fishman to present the Hudson River Park Friends Report.
Thank you. Last meeting, I had a very long report. So this meeting, I have a very short report. The only updates since the last meeting of any significance really are our board recruiting in the past 12 months. We have gotten 6 new board members, 5 of them women. They include a senior advisor from Warburg Pincus, the private equity company, a head of innovation and fashion for fashion and beauty at Instagram, a former development committee member and advisor to Sirhan Real Estate Company, senior managing director and global head of strategic partnerships for Blackstone, and 2 current or former members of the playground committee. We also have 2 other members that were playground committee members to begin with, who we got last year. However, we also lost 5 board members who termed out after many years, and so we are still on the lookout. We seem to be at a plateau of about 28, although we have 36 available seats. And then finally, we just had our playground committee luncheon 2 weeks ago tomorrow. It was very successful. We moved it to a new venue so we could add about 25% more capacity. And for the first time, the fundraising at that event was higher than $500,000, which was a big boost for that group. We sold out, so we may be looking for an even bigger venue for next year so that we can add more capacity. During COVID, we had lost, I would say, probably 50% of our playground committee. And so we went down to about 80 just before 2022. We're now back up to roughly 140, including 20 new members who actually enrolled at the luncheon this year itself. And that is today's very brief report, unless you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there is no further business, I now request that the directors move into executive session to discuss personal matters and that we adjourn the public portion of this meeting. The executive session will not include any action items for approval by the directors. May I please have a motion to move into executive session and adjourn the public portion of today's meeting? Second. Oppositions, abstentions, hearing none, the motion is approved. Thank you. The public portion of the meeting is now adjourned. The trust will now stop the Zoom live recording and the directors will now meet in executive session.